there, it's time for another box of delicious Japanese snacks brought to you by Bokksu. It is easily our favorite sponsorship every month. This time it's gonna be Autumn Harvest. So what do we got first? Cube. Cube? It literally just says cube. Cube. Fried sweet potato? Oh my god, okay. Oh yeah, no, there are tiny little cubes. Oh, not ready for that amount of crunch, I'll tell you that. So they're like sweet potato fries, but much crunchier, obviously. Definitely a little bit sweeter, but the sweet potato flavor is coming through so strong. It's sort of crazy, actually. The next one we got is Benny Emo Purple Yam Pie. Ooh, yeah, no, it's this like a little pie. It's a little pie. Oh man, yeah, no, it's a full-on mini pie. Oh, I'm excited. It's even got pie crust. Okay, wow. Out of all the months that we've been doing the Bokksu ads, this may be one of the most delicious things I've eaten out of these boxes. I'm not gonna lie. Holy shit! Oh damn, God! What? I wish I had another one in here so I could share with the cameraman. Wait, Hojicha roasted green tea financier? Yeah, Hojicha roasted green tea financier. I'm not sure what to expecting from this one, folks. Shoot! This one's packaging is a little bit of a pain in the ass, though. Oh no, that's a bad idea. Oh my god. Hold on. Pull it up that way.
I think the other swords on there are the real ones. This one's not.
Whoa! Look at this thick mamma jamma. That is. Look at him. Oh man, what am I in for? Oh my. So Hojicha is like regular green tea, but a lot I'm gonna say smokier. That's not necessarily the word that you'd want to use for it, but it definitely, it's a lot more bitter, but also great body. And talking about a great body, this is a thick son of a bitch. I'm actually gonna set this down and finish it later because it's that big. I'm a huge fan of matcha and Hojicha. In fact, if you can ever get Hojicha ice cream, soft serve, it's great. Here, cameraman, we got two of these. Pure Gummy Petite Grape. Oh yeah, Japanese gummies, best gummies. There's no better gummies I've ever had than Japanese gummies. And today is no damn different. Oh, it's tasty as hell. Like you have these the little gummies covered in sugar. They're very thick, very flavorful. You know me, thick and flavorful. So the next thing we got, how fascinating. Oh, chocolates. Blanchel mini chocolate Ano Imo sweet potato. By the way, as a huge sweet potato guy, this is fucking great. Like this so far has been nothing but hits. Just maybe not the cubes so much. The cubes were all right, but this is I'm excited about because I don't have a lot of sweet potato chocolate. You know, sweet potato is actually very much an autumn and winter food. In fact, one of the best things you can do in Japan is that if you're like walking through a park, there will be stands that'll actually sell like roasted sweet potatoes, and it is amazing. It is spectacular to just walk around in the cold with this nice warm sweet potato with a little bit of brown sugar and cinnamon on it. It's amazing. There's like little sandwich cookies, basically. Yeah, you know what? Those are good. Those are good. Those are solid B for me. Solid B. Ooh, cool. I think we got two of these, so here you go. This is a chestnut pie. This is basically kurimanju, and it's one of my favorite snacks that I used to have from a little Japanese grocer in California. Also one around here called kurimanju. Oh yeah. I can't believe a Japanese snack is taking me back to my childhood, but it really is. I love the taste of chestnut, and a lot of Japanese pastries use chestnut, and I love it. All right, so next we have pure potato chips, sesame oil and salt. Oh my God. Let me in. Oh, they're nice, firm. Oh my God.
If there's anything I know about Japanese potatoes, there's like a TV in there, right?
Oh yeah, huh? This has been nothing but a solid batch so far. I cannot tell you how much I'm in love with this one. Now, this thing's gigantic. Mori no Madeline apple. Look at this. Look. Hold on. Let me take her out. Let me take this big mama out all night. Look at this thick bitch. Oh, you can even taste the chunk of apple in there? Oh yeah, no, you can see it. Full apple flavor. This is good. This is really good. This is a B+, A-. Bokksu, you're killing me over here, and I'm loving every second of it. Kurimi walnut mochi. Walnut mochi. I'm kind of curious. I really like mochi. I didn't like it when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, I've kind of grown into it to where I actually get really excited when people give me mochi now, which I guess just shows my age. That's good. That's really good. Next one, we've got biscuits. We've got biscuits. Put it in a biscuit.
It's a smiley face.
Yep, it's a little smiley face biscuit. This reminds me of Ritz. Very buttery, thin little biscuits. Thinner than Ritz, less salted, more sweet. Oh, by the way, these are Smile Harvest Savory Sesame Biscuit. All right, and I think this is the last one. I didn't get the tea ready this time, like an idiot, like an asshole. I'm so sorry. Yeah, no, guys, that was amazing. Like, I know that we like to talk up these boxes a lot, but I've never lied about anything that we've eaten in here. I've never massaged the truth. I love this stuff. I love these snacks.
How do I get these amazing snacks straight from Japan
Well, if you click
to
the
my
link,
American household?
if you click the link down in the description or in the pinned comment and enter the promo code TeamFourStar10, you'll get 10% off your first box of delicious, delicious Japanese snacks straight from Japan from Bokksu. Thank you so much for another delicious box, and hey, enjoy the video. Later.
Hello and welcome to the Talkcast Podshow, the #1 show on the internet and the watchers of the Watchmen. I'm your host, the masked fighter, Lanny, and I'm joined by the wonderful, talented street vigilante, Mark Ganjingba Soskin. How you doing, Gan?
Pretty good. Wouldn't say I'm a vigilante or anything. Yeah.
Of course not. Of course not. You know, you got. Of course. Yeah. No, that's illegal.
No. Plus, my game's about the other thing, so it can't be vigilante. No.
It's true. You've been working on a game. You got it on Kickstarter right now. I felt like this would be a very appropriate topic to discuss, considering what you've been working on. So please go ahead and explain yourself, sir.
Explain myself. What, are we gonna get real deep into the psychological? No, but you guys probably know me as Gan Xingba. Well, I would think so if you're a fan of DBZA, which a lot of you probably are. I've voiced Ten Shinhan, Android 17, Jace, Raccoon, Chilled, Jan Valentine, a few other folks in all the abridged stuff. But then I went on and started working on game development. I've worked at, most recently on the Outer Worlds at Obsidian Entertainment. But now I am working on my own thing. I decided to just go out, make my own game, and it's called Henchman Story. It's on Kickstarter right now. It's a visual novel where you play as the henchman for a melodramatic and pretty much inept supervillain. It's been described by a couple people as My Hero Academia meets Office Space, which I'd say is pretty accurate. It's kind of a superhero satire, but there is some drama and romance where you, in the game, it's all story-based, so as the story goes on, you kind of make choices and influence people's opinion of you and kind of shift the direction of it and branch off into about 12 different endings we've got. But yeah, so that's on Kickstarter right now, and to try and get some full professional voice acting, custom soundtrack, some other cool stuff. But yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Awesome. And for those of you listening on the YouTube archive, you'll be able to find a link to that Kickstarter in the description of this here video. And for those of you that showed up live in the chat, I went ahead and dropped the link there for you if you guys would like to check that out at your leisure.
Yeah, no, check it out. Share it around. I'd really appreciate it. You know, I'm not going to do the, I know Kickstarter these days, there's a lot of Kickstarters, right? There's a whole sub-industry of like marketing people that go out and market Kickstarters and all this stuff. I'm not really doing anything like that. I'm not going to give you the used car salesman pitch or anything. Just, if it sounds like a cool concept, check it out. And if you like it, back it or don't, spread it around or don't, but I'd really appreciate the support. But I'm certainly not going to be out here going like, we got the special sale, come down to, whatever County Ford, I'm just, putting it out there and hopefully folks will like it and support it, and we can give it a more complete release.
I know you have quite a few very talented people in the cast here. I saw, at the very least, the one I know, Ant, who is providing his voice for some of these here characters. Looks like you're a little over halfway towards your goal. Awesome.
Yeah, no, we eclipsed the halfway mark yesterday. Ant is in it. He plays 2 characters. He plays Dave, your supervisor, and the evil chef in the secret lair, Chef Antonio. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about the whole cast. We got a lot of talented people. So it should be
yourself included, of course.
Yeah, I'm in there technically. That's one of those things where it's like, because it's a small project, and I'm doing the writing, the coding, and the game direction, and I'm in it. I'm trying to be careful about. I don't want to do the whole like game by Hideo Kojima, produced by Hideo Kojima, written
Right.
by Hideo Kojima. I try to list myself as few times as possible in the credits, because it's not really about.
Yeah, Mark Soskin's Henchman story is a game by Mark Soskin.
Right, starring Mark Soskin, produced by Mark Soskin. No, that would yeah. If I ever get there, it's time to just someone. One of you guys show up and punch me in the face.
Yeah, that'd be a very Lanny move of you, Gon.
No, you guys don't do that completely.
It's because I get shut down every time I ask. I'm the Clive Barker of TFS. Yeah, the reason we're talking about Watchmen is because I know you're all about that comic book life. Hell, you're making a whole game about it. I'm assuming you've read the comic, the graphic novel.
Yeah, I read that a long time ago. That was one of I was kind of just getting into comics and stuff. Well, I suppose not just getting into it, but I was trying to like get to that point where when you first enter comics and you look at the list of like where the heck do you start, right? And Watchmen's was on everyone's list, and eventually I got to Watchmen, but that was reading that comic, still one of the best comics ever in my opinion. I mean, it's just been so influential. I mean, everything, pretty much I would say every superhero thing today is influenced in some way by Watchmen,
Absolutely, especially when they moved out of that golden era of, like the heroes are just these paragons of good, and started moving into the more like sliding along the gradient scale of what would an actual superhero society be like. You get these really shitty people who are like trying to do good by their own reasonings, but they're all very broken people on the inside. Yeah, no, it was kind of the first real successful deconstruction of the superhero genre. I mean, there have been things that have been done before, maybe there were some that were pretty good that I haven't heard of, but I mean, Watchmen was the first one that really broke through as kind of like a breakdown, and a look at how the superhero genre kind of works, and what are kind of the inherent not problems with it, but what are the kind of inherent like psychological issues and societal issues that kind of arise as a result of it, Yeah, like what would make a man want to put on a costume and go out there and fight injustice vigilante style? What makes a guy like Rorschach tick? And the fact that it kind of puts you front and center in the brain of Rorschach throughout a majority of that novel is like, yeah, no, this guy's kind of fucked up. Yeah, I mean, he's right, but I don't believe him.
He's sometimes right. He's sometimes right. I mean, he has some.
But he's also crazy as fuck.
Snippets from his journal are a little bit, that's questionable,
Yeah.
But he's right about some things, But I mean, that's part of what's great about it, is that they're all flawed characters that are sometimes right and sometimes wrong, right? Like even the villain Ozymandias, is right in terms of like, the world is going towards this self-destructive thing, but obviously his solution wrong,
very
giant squid, not the best, not what I would have picked, to gear us towards world peace, but
god damn it worked.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's interesting to kind of peer into all that stuff, and kind of everything I think since then, everything that's always presented itself as not your grandpa's superhero story or whatever has been influenced by Watchmen, because it was really, when Watchmen came out, I think, you talked about like why would someone do that? That question had sort of been forgotten, and it was kind of just like, well, why would someone become a superhero? It was just like, well, that's just kind of like what you do, Your parents are dead? Well, geez, put on this cape, go punch some dudes in the face, bud, but I don't think anyone really started to ask that question again until after Watchmen came out, at least in terms of the big media related to superheroes.
Yeah, and it all started basically as a fractured Justice League comic, but like, it wasn't the story that like DC was like, no, you can't use our mainline superheroes like this. Here, make up your own. Okay, so they made like an allegory Batman, an allegory Question, Atom.
Well,
I think
you're sort of right. So Question and Atom were in there. It was an off branch of DC. It was for the company. I think it was Charleston. I'd have to look up the name of it, but the company that created the Question, that created Captain Atom. So like Dr. Manhattan is based on Captain Atom. The Question turned into Rorschach. Owlman, I think, it isn't Batman. He was kind of yet another Batman knockoff that at this point I think has been forgotten. But those were all based on that property. And initially he was just going to use those guys because DC wasn't really using them all that much. But they got a little spooked about including something like Watchmen in something that could be parallel or close to their main continuity that they might have to deal with. And they were kind of a little worried about the reception. But I think it ultimately worked out better in the end, because now,
absolutely,
the show that we're going to talk about, I don't think would exist if it had been ended up just being those characters, because then those characters have all this other baggage, that makes it a little hard for someone outside of the comics audience, the traditional comics audience, to get into and to enjoy. So I think it ultimately worked out better.
Yeah, a lot of the issues in the show, and frankly in the comic, probably wouldn't quite have been so much of a big issue if, say, Superman had existed.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, and someone in the chat is pointing out, it was Owlman. Yeah, it was just Owlman. I was thinking that, and I was like, that doesn't sound right. I thought they changed it. But the original for Owlman was just an Owlman. I think maybe Peacemaker. Someone's saying Blue Beetle, maybe. Might have been. I'd have to look it up a little more. I'd take the chat's word for it.
I would too. They're generally pretty knowledgeable. I mean, they're smart folk. They show up here. So
Blue Beetle. Blue Beetle sounds right because of the vehicle is very much Blue Beetle's little hover pod thing that I can't remember what it was. So yeah, it is kind of, I think, Night Owl's Blue Beetle probably.
Possible, yeah, because of the insanely enhanced technology. I always looked at him as like an allegory of Batman, because it's kind of the same deal. He's just a normal dude with good tech, but Blue Beetle also fills in that role pretty well. Ozymandias is probably like the coolest villain, like at least one of the most intriguing villains to have been introduced into comicdom, though. Just he's the villain that won and the villain that saved the world.
Yeah, no, I mean, just that in and of itself, especially for the time, was really made him really unique. Obviously the famous quote, "No, like, stop me! I did it 20 minutes ago."
It's already done.
That's the best part of the whole thing. It's just part of how Watchmen kind of took traditional comic stories and just like gave it a little bit of a twist. Like, what if this thing was different? What if they didn't succeed? And obviously, it changes the feel of the whole thing.
And you have this, and you get this amazing feeling of just like this slightly off parallel reality. Like, what if like people actually did decide to be vigilantes, and then all this stuff happens, and media would change this way, and Nixon won fucking Vietnam because some dude got magical atom powers.
Yeah. No, that's it's crazy, and everything from I think, shows are coming out that kind of ask that question again in media, or like I'd say The Boys is kind of an attempt at a very similar thing, right? But with more of a corporate angle than a government one, that Watchmen kind of went with.
And like it's still playing with like the idea of like what would happen with these politics in modern times if superheroes existed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Obviously, things change when super crazy powered blue guy can just like walk around,
zap you out of reality, and go build sandcastles on Mars for 30 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So you had this like amazing genre defining piece of media, and it just kind of goes cold for a very long while. Mm-hmm. And then somewhere in the mid-aughts, you get a movie by Zack Snyder. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I have to ask, because there is a division of people with this movie. There are people that absolutely hate it, abhor it, and then there are people that are like, it was okay. I'm in the it was okay camp. How do you feel about the Watchmen movie?
I feel that you could take parts of it. There are parts of it that are fantastic. Like that opening montage is top tier. That was excellent, it
was a great credit sequence.
Good. Yeah. It was, and it did a great job of telling you the backstory, without saying anything, in a really cool stylized way that really, it set everything up perfectly. But then, and then I think the guy who played Rorschach did a great job, I thought.
Yeah.
There were some good performances and there were some good scenes, the scene in the prison where he starts going nuts on people, and you're locked in here with me. I mean, they couldn't have done that any better. But then
he played crazy really well. I mean, he went on to play Freddy Krueger, and then I think he just kind of disappeared.
That's not too bad though, right? Yeah. Considering I think he was a child actor before, wasn't he? I remember.
I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean that's he did a great job. So I think you could take bits that are really good, but I think on the whole, it was just kind of inconsistent. I mean, you had great scenes like that, and then you had like some really gratuitous slow motion action stuff that just didn't fit the vibe, because like we talked about, Watchmen is meant to be a little bit more grounded, and when you start doing this slow motion glorious action stuff, it really doesn't, that's not really the message that Watchmen is sending. But I think sometimes maybe Zach just couldn't help himself. He's just like, but it looks so cool,
Yeah, sometimes you just give a property to Zack Snyder and say, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, I mean, he must have impressed some people, though, because, obviously he got a lot of DC work after that.
I mean, 300 was great. I still love 300.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, that was probably the basis for a lot of his comic book movie stuff. I mean, but 300 was, a lot more surface level, and was almost as much about the bombast and the style of it.
Yeah, it was all style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just like just absurd visuals and absurd situations, right? Which to me is so far removed from Watchmen that it was always going to be tough, because it was just I mean, when you get good at something, right, and you succeed at something, like Zack Snyder made a good movie in 300, it's probably hard to get away from the stuff that got you there, right? Because it's like, well, all this cool slow-mo and these cool stylistic comic book panel-looking this imagery was what everyone loved. So how do you prevent yourself from doing that, even though something like Watchmen is just much more psychological, and even though it has these famous images and famous panels, they're not famous for like, look at all this amazing cool explodey stuff, they're more like artistically rendered, not to say that 300 isn't artistic, but and they're more like not even subtle really, because blood on the comedian's smiley face isn't all that subtle, but it's more like pop art style than
very much so. It's very reminiscent of Pollock?
Well, no, Pollock.
Who am I thinking
you're thinking
of?
of Splatter Paint guy. Warhol, are you thinking of?
Warhol, that's the one I was thinking of. Like the pop art from like the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, that sort of Warhol contrast of here's this familiar thing that you know, but kind of weird, and it makes you feel a little like uneasy looking at it, you know. I think that similar feel maybe was in there.
That kind of adjusted reflection, something familiar but in a different way.
Right.
Like
yeah.
It's and that's Watchmen to a T. Because, you know, the movie, very familiar, but then they completely changed the ending, and I think that's the part that hangs, like, pretty much everyone up. It's like, why not Squid? How hard would that have been?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell with big movies because there's always, you know, how much of it is the director, how much of it is the producers.
How much of it is studios. Like, I don't think a general audience would buy a giant squid. You know, I'm just saying, like, make it the big blue guy. He could cause cancer.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's always it's tough to pin that stuff down, because, you know, like, it's when you watch a movie and every time you can recognize that a line is voiceover, and it's very clearly voiceover. It's always like, well, who decided that? You know, it's kind of, I think that the ending is very much in that kind of category where it's like, who came up with that? No one will ever know, probably, unless Zach decides to talk, but at this point, Justice League is so much more of the conversation around Snyder that I don't think anyone will ever find out what the reasoning behind the Watchmen ending was.
He'll throw the giant squid into the Snyder cut of fucking Justice League. Just here you go, you got it.
It'll come back around. That'd be quite impressive. I'd honestly give him props for that kind of brick joke, just to say, screw everyone, man. You know, here, you want your squid? Here's your squid.
HBO paid $30 million for this squid. But speaking of HBO, wow, awesome segue. Thank you, me. Years and years and years later, 2018 rolls around, and we get this announcement trailer for a new Watchmen miniseries on HBO. And I don't know about you, but when I first heard that they were doing a little miniseries, I'm like, I was a little skeptical. I was like, okay, what are they covering? Is this like, are they redoing like the comic book as if like the Zack Snyder thing didn't happen? Are they doing it after the movie? Are they doing it after the comic? There were a lot of questions in my mind. What were your original thoughts when you first heard that Watchmen was going to be made into a little miniseries?
I was definitely in the same skeptical camp. I was like, sort of, at first I thought it was going to be a remake too, because they weren't clear on whether it was a sequel or not. They wouldn't call it, they refused to call it a sequel or a spin-off or really define it as anything. And, you know, so and the teaser came out, and it was, I think, the original TikTok thing, and I still didn't know what was going on. And I knew all I knew was Lindelof was attached. And, you know, I admit I'm not really a Lost fan. I'm not really a fan of his usual mystery box kind of approach. So I was very, very skeptical. Even after seeing the initial stuff, I was like not bought in, at least at the start.
Yeah, so you get this trailer with like a bunch of people in Rorschach masks, a bunch of characters you don't really know, and at least when you see all the people with the Rorschach masks, you're like, okay, this has to take place after everything. Like this can't take place during, unless they're completely redoing a lot, like just rewriting everything.
Right. I mean, it could have been like an alternate telling, you know, or something like that. That's sort of what I initially thought it would be. I mean, because like indirect sequel was definitely the last thing that I expected from it, just given, you know, the kind of mixed reception of the movie, given how long it had been since the movie, and obviously how long it had been since the comic, you know. I didn't expect it to go in that direction, because I was absolutely certain that, you know, whenever you're creating something, the first people and you start referencing characters from the previous stuff, someone in the room's going to go, well, wait a second, what about the people who don't know this? You know, we have to explain it to everybody. And that happens in everything. Even if it's not related to another character, there's always going to be, whenever you're making something creative and complicated, somebody's going to ask, well, what if they don't get it? We have to explain this stuff, you know? So that's definitely not what I expected.
And of course, they do that in this, but they do it in such amazing, like they do it in such awesome, creative ways. Like I think the way that you learn about, I think one of my favorite points of that type of exposition comes in, I think the third episode, I want to say, when wait, is it the third episode of this? Yeah, it's the third episode when Laurie Blake, you know, the Silk Spectre 2 shows up, and she starts telling a joke to the phone that's supposed to connect you to Dr. Manhattan, and it gives you this idea of like, okay, this is what these people were about. This is, you know, Night Owl. He had all these fancy gadgets, but he was kind of a pussy, wouldn't do anything with them. And so he just kind of like disappeared. And you also get this kind of hint that he might be in federal prison somewhere.
Yeah, he's the one. He's one of the few guys they don't bring into it like directly.
Yeah, like the senator in that episode, Joe Keane Jr. He says like, you know, if I were president, I could even get that owl out of that cage for you. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, so you're kind of implying that dude's he's in federal prison for some unknown crimes, probably vigilantism, but
yeah, it's it's interesting how the show this is probably a big benefit of Lindelof being the guy on the show because of his mystery box resume. Is it got away with being able to let you stay confused and to not explain everything right away. Because I think what you're saying is definitely true in terms of kind of the indirect ways that they explain stuff, but also that it took a long time for even those indirect explanations to show up in the show. You went through the first few episodes, really, and they didn't really explain a lot of it. You know, like if you watch the first episode, there were a ton of theories about like, is the chief of police Owlman? You know, who are these people? And everyone's trying to figure out where the original Watchmen are. And they really don't. It all doesn't come together until like really close to the final act. And it's pretty impressive. I think it all comes together in easily the best episode of the show, A God Walks into a Bar. Like that's where they kind of explain, like they just give you, okay, here's everything that's been going on, and here's how all the events of this kind of transpired up to this point. But you're kind of drip fed all this information, mostly through Laurie Blake and her confidant, who's like a history buff. And you're taught, you're pretty much fed everything that happened in the original Watchmen by them. And I think one of my favorite things about her joke is not only is it very informative about like, okay, so this is how she feels about these people. This is what these people did in the past. And this is, you know, there are some subtle hints about what happened on the in-between, but it is a literal brick joke. Right. Yeah.
Like, I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah. No, that whole scene was pretty good. And then the car falling down and her just like looking up towards Mars and laughing, you know, as if he responded. Yeah, I thought. Which
for a while you think he did, because, you know, in the comics they were romantically attached, and you even get to see her insane Dr. Manhattan sex toy.
Jesus, yeah. Yeah. They kind of
no mortal can compare.
Yeah. Gosh, that was I mean, in general, it did a really good job of painting the relationships and painting a picture of the past without, I think that guy who follows her around is really the closest thing they do to like more traditional, like here's an exposition dump kind of guy. But they did it in kind of a situation where she's constantly like making jokes about it and making fun of him as he's doing it. So it's, you know, it's never really boring, and, you know, you're kind of entertained.
Yeah, he's the one that outright just explains at the behest of Laurie Blake that to Angela Abar, the main character of this story, that's, you know, okay, you want to know what my damage is with soups? Tell him, kid. And then she basically says, okay, yeah, the comedian raped her mom and had her, and, you know, she's not huge on superheroes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's good to have a character like that, because they did a good job of framing him as the type of guy who would explain that stuff to people. Because if it had come from her, it would feel a disingenuous
Forced.
exposition dump, because she's not the type of character to do that, which is what a mistake a lot of people make. Is like, oh, we need to have this character explain something, and it's a character who would normally, like, why would this character ever explain anything to you? But they did a good job of placing him in there pretty strategically.
Yeah, she might be my favorite character in the show. She takes no shit, and she's just hysterical in pretty much every scene she's in.
Yeah, she's very much over it, would be her character, pretty much in a couple words.
Hey, mirror guy, I know you know it's Looking Glass.
Yeah, that whole scene, the whole when she shows up, it's great because, the first couple episodes present these guys as very serious and, very into their whole shtick, and she just shows up and is just kind of like messing with everyone and just kind of fucking around, it almost feels like, And it kind of, they did a good job of setting her up as like the person who knows everything, which makes the twist, later, right, when she walks into that trap, all the more surprising.
Yep.
Because you just wouldn't expect that to happen to her of all the characters. So it's, they did a pretty good job in general with that. Although I'd have to say for, probably Angela Abar is probably my favorite character in the thing. She just carries a lot of the show.
Oh, she absolutely does. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would never, I don't think you could take anything away from Regina King's fucking performance. I mean, she got her outstanding leading actress in a limited series Emmy for this show and that role.
Yeah,
she fucking killed it.
Yeah, she won a bunch of awards. She did a fantastic job. And I do have to. One of the people in the chat mentioned the pun with her name. I do have to wonder that with her though, did they come up with the pun first and then come up with her name? I kind of suspect that they came up with the title "A God Walks Into a Bar" and then named her afterwards.
A-Bar?
Yeah.
I would not be surprised given how many just winks at the camera they give to the old Watchmen material, and there's a lot of it. Mm-hmm. From the way Looking Glass eats his beans by just pulling up his little reflecto mask and just looking all like Rorschach. Mm-hmm. To there are a number of lines and stuff that just like lead back to hey, remember this, remember that, huh?
Yeah, but they do it in a good way where it's like because I think one of the themes of the show is about legacy, right? The legacy mm-hmm. of society, obviously with the riots and everything, a legacy of all these different characters, and I think that's something that, in comics, sometimes that can feel a little cheesy when you have, like, the second version of an old superhero, But I think they did a good job of, like, creating a character that's very much a Rorschach, He's taking up the mantle in a lot of ways, and Rorschach's legacy is, his book inspired all these people and all this stuff, but in a way that didn't feel just like, oh, well, someone in the head office decided that we can't not have that character, so we made that character again, It felt very much like, well, yeah, this guy could come out to be a lot like Rorschach because of, the conspiracy surrounding the whole squid thing, and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, some people who this happened to and, in this whole situation would turn out to be pretty paranoid and, with his journal out there, probably would be influenced him by quite a bit. So I think they did a pretty good job with that.
I asked myself the question a lot because you're right. This is like all about legacy. It is a constant theme. Mm-hmm. The show has like several running motifs that have to do with legacy and things of like hereditary nature. The egg shows up a lot and plays a huge role in the show mm-hmm. in terms of its theming. But I often, I asked myself a lot, I wonder how Rorschach would feel knowing that he's like an alt-right icon. Would he care that that political group pulled up his, took up his mantle? Or would he more care that they are kind of at least following his message, look, the truth must be fucking known?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, the character in the original Watchmen comic was kind of a little bit of a right-wing nut, at least when it came mm-hmm. to social issues. Like there are some very anti-gay quotes, that he has. And stuff like that.
Yeah, he's an insanely repressed character who his mother was a prostitute, and he was beaten a lot, and he just grew to be this insanely dysfunctional human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. So I don't know how he'd feel about it. It's hard to say, but I guess that's part of the appeal, right? Is these unintended consequences to your actions, and not immediate consequences, but consequences years down the line. Because you see that with every character has these unintended consequences, from Dr. Manhattan, to Adrian Veidt. Obviously, the unintended consequences personified by his daughter. And obviously a lot of consequences due to him, with the squid rain and everything. And how everything, it's interesting with him because, right, he has that video to the President Redford where he explains everything and here's my plan and everything's going to go great. And none of it goes great.
Allow me to explain to you in great detail how I did all of this stuff and what you are going to do.
Right. But it doesn't pan out like he'd planned and like he'd hoped. And that's sort of part of the idea behind their view of legacy is it's sometimes part of it works out like you'd hope and like you'd imagine, but you can't guarantee it. Sometimes things just go off in a direction you never expect. And so, you just have to kind of do your best in a lot of ways.
Because Adrian Veidt is easily one of the more interesting parts of the show. When you first see him, the first question that popped into my head, when you first see him just kind of sitting in that weird reality with his two servants, just kind of going about this planet that has very odd types of flora, just kind of scattered about. The first thought to jump to my mind is okay, this guy's important. Based on his looks, I'm guessing that's Ozymandias.
Yeah.
That's where that's where your head just kind of jumps when you're desperately looking for a familiar character.
Mm-hmm. And they did a great job of teasing that out, and then finally revealing it when he signs that letter. And in a way that I think my girlfriend was watching it, and she never read Watchmen, but where I was excited about it because I knew this guy was, but they did a good job of still, even if you didn't know who he was, it felt like it was building up, I feel to something, and that this person is a big deal, and other people talk about him, but they did a great job with that whole mystery, and it's a very creative idea for what the heck happened to Ozymandias. I guess I never would have guessed pocket dimension on Europa with clone servants that he repeatedly kills.
Just treating them literally treating them like pawns and tools for a game that he needed to create for himself to keep entertained. So fucking brilliant and so fucking on brand.
Yeah. And just the whole spelling out the save me with the corpses is that's a very... They did a good job of making him feel like the same character, because you can feel that's a kind of move that he would make, just using corpses and human bodies to spell out letters to save himself, And
he just continues to use his immense intellect to literally outplan everything. And everything probably would have gone exactly to his plan if Rorschach had never dropped his journal. So you have this ideological philosophy going up against another ideological philosophy, which is where all of this kind of culminates into this amazing mystery plot, which isn't even the main plot of there are so many plots and subplots within this.
Right, yeah.
Because it all starts with the mystery of who killed the sheriff, or who killed the police chief.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, the core story is really just, Angela Abar's story. And then all these other mysteries about these other characters kind of do a good job of spinning off and latching onto them. And yeah, I mean, I think they do a good job of, unlike, which is what I wasn't a super big fan of with Lost and stuff, the idea of taking this one mystery at the start and then drawing it out the whole time. You find out who killed the police chief pretty quick,
Yeah.
Even though whether or not
outright
you accept
confesses
it,
right away.
Right?
But then the mystery transforms into like, who the fuck is this guy?
Right. Yeah, they do. It does a great job of. There's this storytelling technique where, when you have a distant goal or whatever to like, the characters are trying to get to point B. What you do is you have them make progress, and they're like, well, yes, they make progress, but then this other thing happens, and the show is just constantly doing yes, but with each episode basically. So it doesn't feel like it might in Lost, where it's like, well, we've just been treading water for however many seasons. You feel like they are making progress, but there's new developments that kind of make it more complicated or change what the goal is in a way.
Yeah. So they go about these plots, and it starts weaving this web, like where this this nexus is now connected to this one, and you're just starting to see all of these things line up in such a beautifully brilliant way that I can definitely see where you're going with the Lost comparison for his, with Lindelof's being his other project and having that just kind of meander from place to place for like way too long. Having this be 9 episodes long really made that work. Because I know one thing we were talking about, actually, before we even began here, maybe poor form, I don't know, that each of these episodes is very self-contained. You can watch them in a bubble and be kind of satisfied, but also left wanting more.
Yeah, exactly. Each episode has its own full arc, with rising, falling action and all that stuff, and then ties into the greater arc of the show in a way that's really good, that I think a lot of the best shows, especially shorter ones, where each episode is kind of its own self-contained story. And they just do. I think they were just really disciplined about that, and maybe it was the fact that they only had 9 episodes, and so they just really had to hammer on and make each one kind of its own thing and to get the story there. But definitely in a way that, I didn't expect, given not only Lost, but The Leftovers, right, which was another mystery box show where it's like the mystery of what happened to these people. Was it the rapture? Wasn't it? And that's just kind of the thing that just keeps going on through the show. I watched a few of those episodes, so I don't know if that one gets wrapped up a little quicker than in Lost. Maybe it does, but this one does a much better job of, usually the central mystery of each episode is answered within the episode, I think, right?
Yeah. Pretty much. I mean, it obviously brings up more questions, but every episode they focus on a central plot. One of the ones I watched more recently was Little Fear of Lightning, the one that focuses on Wade, or Looking Glass. And probably one of my favorite scenes in the show, because you actually get to see what happened, like, next to ground zero when that squid hit.
Yeah.
And the kind of trauma that would cause somebody. Because when you're initially introduced to Looking Glass, he's eclectic, strange, and he, he's an interrogator. He's very good at reading people. And he has like all these very odd tics, and it's awesome that you get a full episode to kind of like look into what makes him work. He was there at ground zero when the squid exploded, and he only survived because he was in a hall of mirrors after literally being sexually assaulted by some like street girl.
Yeah, no, that's you talk about a traumatic experience. It doesn't get much crazier than that. So for a guy to actually function, right, they would have to be completely either strip themselves down to nothing and build themselves back up, or be, like Rorschach, incredibly repressed.
Yep,
which is basically what Looking Glass is, in a way.
Hold all the way up inside. Just stay in your own brain. Get yourself a security bunker. Wrap your head in reflective material. Save yourself from those squids, because you are. Oh man, that is trauma.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, it's intense, and I love that scene in that episode where they have the focus group of getting people to go back to New York. That whole shtick was pretty great, I thought, and just the fact that his job is a focus test guy, even just that, like, it's one of those things that is like, oh, I guess that makes sense, why is he so good at reading people, or what would someone who's this good reading people do, because he's not normally a cop, they mentioned before.
Yeah, because they all have to have a secret identity as police officers in Oklahoma,
Right.
Because of a traumatic event known as the White Night, where a bunch of people known as the 37th Cavalry. These are all like the followers of Rorschach who showed up and just killed a bunch of cops one night. So a reform was put into place that allowed all officers, mandated all officers wear masks. So they all become basically the new Watchmen.
Yeah. Secret police, basically, but posing as something like the Watchmen, right? You know,
pretty much. Like they act as vigilantes, but they are the law.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it does a little bit of what the original comic does, where it just takes the concept of superheroes and twists it a little, and where it takes, you know, the concept of Watchmen, and it's like, well, what if instead of private citizens, the superheroes were, you know, government secret police kind of characters. And I think that was...
You got all these cops running around playing dress up as like chrome heads. There's just a dude that wears a red ski mask known as the Red Scare.
Yeah, you can tell that was just a character they put in there for fun. He's great. He's just really funny all the time.
The fucking equipment manager just wears a fucking panda head.
Oh, yeah. And it's all messed up, you know, too. It's like, man, like, you can't get a better one, you know?
Yeah. So, like, what's his story? He doesn't get an episode.
Yeah.
But so you get this. It's actually kind of rare in media to get this weird sort of look at what a a left-leaning totalitarian government would look like, because they immediately like repeal the Second Amendment. They confiscate all of the guns from the people that they believe to be racists or followers of Rorschach.
Yeah, well, left-leaning posing, right? You know, because left-leaning posing, because those people are actually in league with the cavalry and the Klan and everything. So I wouldn't say that I wouldn't really characterize it as a left-leaning totalitarian government. Exactly.
Yeah, left posing.
And especially, I mean, even the idea of a secret police isn't very left-leaning, right? Someone in the chat mentioned that, that hasn't aged well. And I would say that it was never meant to, like you're always supposed to be it's meant to be cautionary. So it's like the idea of I think it does a much more subtle job of something of what The Boys is doing, right? Where it's like, well, what if the superheroes were kind of not necessarily the good guys, and at first, right, especially with American media in the past, at least, the instinct of a lot of viewers is to side with the police force, and the guys upholding the law, and especially, they're dressed as superheroes too. But then, as it goes on, it's like, maybe they're not so great, Yeah, maybe it's not the best.
Maybe the system that's allowing this to happen isn't great. I mean, there are definitely good people among them. Abar being a good example, but even she like literally beats a suspect until he gives up information.
Yeah, I would say not necessarily model cop. Behavior, I would say. But that's part of, and you find out kind of where that rage and everything comes from. But I think it shows, it's part of that there is to show that how a good person like Angela Abar, because she is, I would argue, despite doing some not great things, is still a good person.
Overall a good person,
with the anonymity and authority, do bad stuff because it would help them and because they feel like there wouldn't be a consequence to it, right? So like I think you're supposed to be kind of disturbed when you see those scenes.
And you get the awesome and literal parallel in This Extraordinary Being, the episode where we get introduced to the actual identity of Hooded Justice and the formation of the original Minutemen, when Abar downs these memory pills and sees exactly like what happened to this old man who strung up her police chief.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that whole episode, did a great job of kind of encapsulating kind of the other theme. They did a great job of, obviously race is, we talked about legacy being a theme of the show, but the other major one is obviously, of course, race, that episode did a fantastic job of really highlighting that and bringing it to the fore. And I one of the things the show is just really, really good for a lot of reasons, but the use of the, Tulsa riots that are kind of an event that isn't really talked about enough, in our history books.
I was actually going to say, when I first saw that in the show, I'm like, oh shit, yeah, like alternate history and all that. I didn't learn until after I watched the show that was a real event. School did not teach me that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, which is really a real shame, because it's a pretty important, thing, and obviously terrible. So, I think that's one of the shows, what'll end up being one of the show's best legacies is the fact that it did bring that to light to a lot of people, which is good. But I think that episode did a really great job of portraying that whole thing with Hooded Justice. Barnaby, relax. You're okay.
Oh, puppy.
He's just being dramatic. Obviously, neither of us are really experts on that type of thing. But from where I'm sitting, I thought it did a pretty good job of touching on race in a very profound kind of way with that episode.
Mm-hmm. And it really plays into that theme of legacy, especially because in that dark reflection sort of way, you have this character who hides his face in both manners. Like he hides himself as he tries to paint himself as a white guy wearing a mask to go out and fight racial injustice. Mm-hmm. And then there you have it, like 2 generations later, his granddaughter is running around and she paints like her face, she paints an extra black stripe over the top of her face. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to read into there thematically, which is really fucking cool, and it plays both into the themes of legacy and into the themes of race.
Yeah, and just the fact that, you can make the argument that the legacy of a lot of, American politics and stuff is racial oppression and whatnot. So, it's all they do a good job of tying it together. And that's one of the most important things that the show was able to accomplish, probably.
And finally, all of this gets kind of tied up in the plot about Dr. Manhattan, mm-hmm. who is only ever referenced throughout the series. He's obviously the key figure. Everybody talks about him. He's basically a god. He's referred to as a god a number of times. Mm-hmm. And heavy spoilers from this point forward for anybody that wants to actually experience the show themselves. Please tune out here and watch it. It is fantastic, because this is where everything's leading, basically.
Yeah. Were we not supposed to do spoilers? I apologize to anyone that hasn't watched the show, because I've probably spoiled a ton of stuff.
There's a lot of things that have been spoiled, but this is the big one.
Yeah, obviously.
So in the, again, I'll say it, best episode of the show, a god walks into a bar. We see that Dr. Manhattan approached Angela at a bar and he's confused because there's this blockage of time where he and her get into a relationship, because I guess Dr. Manhattan still likes to, get it on with human women every now and again. He's a god. He'll do what he wants.
Does the Zeus thing, Zeus. Yeah. Zeus would show up as a friggin' crane or something and be like, "Hey, baby, what's going on?" Pretty much. Although I don't know. I think it's pretty much implied that he hasn't done that before with anyone since Silk Spectre, right?
Mm-hmm. Pretty much. Yeah. It's implied that he's basically been on Mars and he came back to Earth because something happened. There's a blockage in the way he can see time, which they write around very, very interestingly in this episode. He experiences all moments of his life at the exact same time. And it like various parts of it will be brought up because something will be reminiscent of something else that has happened or will happen. So he's having this conversation with Angela at a bar, and every now and again he'll just like stop and react to something else. But his reaction will apply to the point in time where he is and the point in time later where he is currently talking about it. And sometimes this is a big moment where he drops a bunch of lines from the original Watchmen comic too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that was yeah, that's a tough thing to write. I've tried to write a character like that in the past, but it's like because it's just a concept that I think they do a pretty good job, like explaining it how like I experience my life all at the same time is a nice, simple, concise way of doing it, you know. But the idea of being able to see time not as time, but as like just one thing laid in front of you is a wild concept. I think, you know, it's pretty. I wouldn't say it's common in sci-fi, but it's been done quite a bit, and I think they did a really good job of presenting that in a digestible way without focusing on it too much, without really diving into it, because I think they, you know, with a guy like Dr. Manhattan, you're able to sort of hand wave the idea of, well, how does that not drive someone instantly insane or insane over time, right? Because it's not how we're meant to perceive the universe. But yeah, I think they did a really, really interesting job of not only explaining it, you know, but kind of showing it by splicing the scenes from different times together.
Yeah. And the way they answer that question is how does that not drive them insane? Clearly it kind of has, because he doesn't really have like human agenda left in him, really. It's just like, oh, this is just fact. This is how things are. This is how they will be. But I'm confused about this point in time.
Right.
But
yeah, it's not so much that he's been driven insane so much as he's kind of already, when he became Dr. Manhattan, he cut the part of his brain out that was kind of the more empathetic human part of his brain that would go crazy seeing this, and that already was kind of, that didn't exist anymore, basically. So he's very much like objective, almost computer-like, you know, and that's how he's able to handle it.
Yeah, he starts out in the comics. He starts out as like still being relatively humanish after he's put himself back together. Like already learning how to reassemble yourself probably's got to do a number on you psychologically.
Yeah, I think, you know,
maybe.
Tough.
But like, you know, he still like tries to wear clothes. He's still seeing the woman that he was with when he got disintegrated. But as time goes on, he starts to become more and more distant. He starts to care less and less about those around him, and just becomes the Dr. Manhattan we end up with, who must be the single most frustrating person to have a conversation with.
Yeah. No, it's, yeah, you'd have to have a lot of patience talking to that dude, which I guess, you know, she did, but he basically kind of, you know, she did try to leave multiple times, right? She's like, this guy's like, I'm
but he knew she wasn't going to,
right?
So
yeah. Basically, they fell in love because she was the only one who would put up with his bullshit, right?
Yeah, she was intrigued by this strange person. One of my favorite lines in like favorite back and forths in that scene is, "And your favorite song's about to come on right now." And like Tunnel of Love starts playing. She's like, "Wow, I've never heard this song in my life." And he just goes back, "And now it's your favorite."
Oh man, yeah, that was. Yeah, no, they did that whole scene was pretty clever, and it helps because both of those actors did a great job. Yeah, I think he got nominated for a couple awards too, right?
He must have,
but yeah,
he was really good.
Granted, you know, he had a lot less time kind of to showcase it because he was really only Dr. Manhattan for that one episode, basically. Whereas before he was kind of just husband guy, right?
Yeah. And that's where like that's where the big spoiler comes in. It turns out Dr. Manhattan, who they've kind of like joked about, like, yeah, no, he can't just disguise himself as a human. He can't just be down here. Has been masquerading as Angela Abar's husband this whole time, due to them putting this weird ionic ring in his brain so that it would lock away all of his Dr. Manhattan-ness or something. Yeah,
he put the magic, you know, the one ring in there. It's a science magic, basically, so that it could happen. And then he names himself Cal, which, as someone pointed out in the chat, is very likely a reference to Superman, you know, Kal-El and whatnot. But yeah, and then he's just normal husband dude.
Yeah, normal husband man who just is also very good, but is only plays like a supporting character throughout this entire show. But then when you realize the actual importance of him, you're like, holy shit. Because she comes in like shit's going down. I need you to trust me. She pulls out a hammer and starts beating his brain in.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, because at that point, you know, I think... Did we know at that point that he was Dr. Manhattan? We knew about the ring, right? I thought at that point, or maybe I'm not remembering correctly.
I don't think at the point where she shows up at the end of the previous episode that we knew he was Dr. Manhattan, because she shows up.
That's right. No, someone, Vight's daughter, mentions
knew where Dr. Manhattan was, or like mentioned her husband.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so when
we have a problem.
At first you're very shocked, but then she pulls out the ring and you're like, oh shit, you know.
And then you see that blue glow, and all of a sudden he's back to being incredibly frustrating to talk to.
Yeah.
And you even get a flashback in the next episode to their conversation at the bar, and you can see that he's replying to her in both timelines about like, nothing. It just reminded me of something.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's. I thought they did a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, outstanding writing. I can see why that episode in particular was kind of the the Emmy sweeper for them.
Yeah, no, that one was amazing. And like I said, you know, I think the pun for one, and just the general concept makes me think that might have been where the whole concept came from. Was that whole episode? I wouldn't be surprised, because it is everything kind of leads up to it, and everything really that's happened in the story is because of that, basically. So
yeah, that episode itself would have made for a fantastic short film.
Yeah, I mean, you could have made that episode probably as a kind of like one-off epilogue of what happens to Dr. Manhattan, and it would have worked.
It's great. I mean, you could have like introduced like some of the concepts from some of the other episodes, maybe stretch that episode out to, I don't know, 70, 80 minutes, and I think you would have had something pretty great just on its own. But the fact that we got a 9 episode series out of it, just great.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to stretch it out anymore. Because I think they did a great job with pacing everything.
Oh yeah.
Although I sort of wonder
what I'm saying is if you were doing something standalone and you were going to take that episode, maybe stretch it out just a little bit more, interject some of the other ideas that they had.
Yeah, I'm glad they did though, because I think, you know, if you did it on its own, it would feel a lot more like you know, El Camino, the Breaking Bad thing, which was good, but also not like, you know, it did feel kind of like a side story kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
like, hey, we just want to tie this stuff up. Here you go.
Yeah. Whereas, you know, I think Watchmen the show was able to create a whole new story that unto itself, I think, that works by itself. It works as a sequel to Watchmen. It just works as a lot of different things.
Yeah, Yahya Abdul Mateen II, I believe is his name. Might have butchered the fuck out of that, but yeah, he also won a Emmy for that particular episode and that role. So yeah, well deserved.
Yeah, I'd say so for sure. I mean, that's one of those things in a show where a show depends on the chemistry and the ability, you know, of two specific actors, and really the whole show wouldn't have worked if they didn't have good chemistry and they didn't do a great job of playing off of each other in those scenes. Like, the whole thing would have fallen apart. So I mean, yeah, they both Regina King and he certainly deserve all the accolades they got for that.
And then, of course, in true mystery box fashion, I can't go through this without talking about the ending that we got for this series.
Yeah.
Because the plot between like pretty much all of the antagonistic forces was to try to siphon Dr. Manhattan's power and give it to somebody else. This goes between the evil senator dude and the daughter of Adrian Veidt, literally the stolen daughter. Like, she she stole his semen.
That whole thing was weird, but fitting.
It was, but it just like, you know what? This is exactly what would happen. There's no way he would have like legitimately had a daughter. He would have like this is how it would have happened.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. If you'd had he hooked up with someone and had a secret daughter somewhere, it wouldn't have felt natural, you know. If they wanted to have someone that was a daughter and that was a manifestation of his legacy, that was a very creative way of doing it. That did feel believable.
Yeah. Again, it felt very on brand, and the fact that that daughter also had a daughter who is just her clone.
Oh, yeah, that was... Yep.
So, like, there are lots of layers to go into there. She is also a very interesting character.
Yeah, it's she's interesting, and it's like if there is one thing that's off about the show for me is that I'm not sure we got quite enough time to really totally understand her, you know, because there is a lot to unpack. But you know, there's a lot of complicated stuff like being able to see time all at once that the show has to deal with. So they kind of and
we only got 9 episodes to do all this, and like, you know, it was all very well paced. Mm-hmm. It all came out very well in the end. So it's like, I think that's a sacrifice that's okay to make, but I would have loved to have more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
yeah. So after all that's said and done, Dr. Manhattan gets disintegrated. All of his energy gets dispersed and like collected into this battery where they're going to try to transform somebody else into Dr. Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And oddly enough, once again, it's Adrian Veidt that kind of saves the world.
Yeah, no, that was, again, that's one of those interesting things where it's, you know, bad person who's done very bad things, you know, ends up doing a good thing, but it doesn't offset his bad things, right? Because at the end, they still arrest him and they still take him away. But it kind of fits the whole theme of Watchmen in a lot of ways, right?
It absolutely does. Like doing the right things for maybe even the right reasons, but in the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know. I would say it's probably definitely the wrong reasons, because it seemed like he did it out of sheer ego, basically.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he did it really to save the world. He was just like, he
wanted to prove that he fucking could.
Right, he wanted to prove he could, and he just like was like, oh, you think... It was a kind of a spite versus spite contest of his daughter's spite versus his spite, and it's like, I'll show you. I have way more spite. Only I can. You can't surpass me by becoming Dr. Manhattan. I have to be, you know, the...
Yeah, I'm just going to get rid of it entirely. Fuck you.
Yeah, exactly.
Say goodbye to everything. Boom.
Yeah.
Just like... And the best part is that he gets rid of her using the stuff that they'd shown previously. It's like, oh yeah, all this distortion shit that I have, yeah, I'll just use that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, all this squid rain that I have.
Yeah. I mean, it was a little bit of a stretch, right? But it was enough that I was like, it was clever enough and brought back enough that I could accept it, kind of.
But when literally everything in this show is kind of a stretch, when you have to accept that there's a big blue cock-waving god out there.
Well, right, yeah.
You accept it. You accept it.
There's a certain amount of suspension of disbelief, right? And I thought they strained it just a tiny bit with the frozen squid, but I think it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out perfectly. So at the very end, you're left with this cliffhanger of Dr. Manhattan possibly having transferred his energy in, like, his powers and his energy, all of his essence, into an ordinary egg. Mm-hmm. And Angela eats that egg, and, you know, in A God Walks Into a Bar, she's like, so you're telling me that if you were to give me your powers, I'd be able to walk on water? Yeah, why not? And the last shot you get is her foot stepping down into her pool, and it cuts right before it hits. It's like, goddamn it, Sopranos again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was quite Sopranos or...
not quite there.
Or,
but,
you know, something like Sopranos, Mad Men type thing, where it's just like, here's an ending that we're not going to really tell you anything.
It was more Inception, where it's like, okay, what are we to take from this?
Yeah, and I thought they did a good job with the egg thing, because they tell you that and you assume it's that egg, right? Without really saying that it's that egg. She just kind of sees it.
Watch the eggs get smacked, like all of them get smacked to the ground. That's the one that's unharmed.
Right. Yeah. It's I mean, I think with the way it ends, it would be pretty disappointing if she didn't have the powers, right? Because then it would be like, well, what was the point, So I think it kind of has to have that ending. Like, I think that there's less a question of what happens and more just like, we're just not going to show you, so you have to imagine it kind of thing.
Yeah, and then we get the news some months later. They're like, yeah, no, this isn't getting renewed for a second season. This is what you get. How do you like? On one hand, I'm like, you know what? Cool. Like that's. I feel like that's all I kind of need. Like, I'm fine with ambiguous endings. But on the other hand, it's like, but it was so good.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be really difficult to make a sequel because you'd have to deal with the fact, they did a great job of dealing with the presence of a character like Dr. Manhattan, both in the original Watchmen and this show, is something that you have to be very careful with from a storytelling perspective, because he's so powerful and so all-knowing that he can, if you play it wrong, the audience is left wondering, well, why didn't, that person just solve all the problems? And so you'd have to, not to mention, the I don't know what you'd do. Like, you'd have to either you'd have to completely remove Angela Abar, in a similar way to how Watchmen, the comic, and how this story did it, to where they're kind of off to the side, which would probably not be super satisfying. Or you'd have to be like, oh, well, she's just learning and she's just figuring it out, which I think it would turn into more of a superhero origin story, which I really don't think would fit with the show.
You'd end up with like something like Heroes, and that just does not feel good.
Not that Heroes was bad originally.
No,
but I mean,
it had a number of good seasons.
I just think the themes of the show are so grounded and heavy, like that. I think it would be a little bit of a disservice to turn it into another superhero origin story show. So I think it was probably the right decision to not have a second season.
Yeah, I actually very much agree with that. I was in this like kind of happy medium place where it's like, okay, it feels like all of the characters that you care about kind of got their story wrapped up, tied up neatly. You're left with this ambiguous question of like, oh, what's next? But if they were to even try to expand upon that, where the hell did they go?
Right. And how would they, tie it to the themes of legacy and race that were so important and so part of the reason it was so successful? Like, how would it would be? Yeah, I mean, I thought they did such a good job with those, especially because it's a delicate, combination of topics, obviously, it would be quite the gamble, I think, to have, superpowered Doc Manhattan, Angela Abar, and still try to make it that grounded, real, it's sometimes depressing kind of thing into a second season.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I think we got like a pretty good spiritual successor to this show in Lovecraft Country. Have you seen any of that yet?
No, I haven't taken a look, actually.
It's really, it's legitimately really, really good. Each episode feels like it has its own genre. Like, one episode will feel like a Indiana Jones style adventure movie. Another one will be like a haunted house movie. The last one that just came out, legitimately creepy, felt kind of like one of those old, Drag Me to Hell-esque curse movies. Lovecraft Country is really good. I recommend it highly.
Yeah, I'll have to put that on the old list of dozens of shows that I need to watch.
Yeah. It just keeps growing. You know what? These shows couldn't have come at a better time than fucking quarantine, but you got a game that you're working on. Would you like to let everybody once again just know Henchman story currently out on Kickstarter? Want to give the elevator pitch again real quick, just for
sure.
Everybody that might be popping
Apologies
in.
to everyone who heard this before, but I'm working on a visual novel called Henchman Story, where you play as the lowly henchman for bumbling supervillain. It's kind of superhero satire with bits of romance and drama in there. You play it by kind of making choices throughout the story, and it leads you down various paths to about 12 different endings and affects your relationships with characters and stuff. But yeah, it's kind of I would say my influences were kind of Mel Brooks and Office Space and mixed with superheroes kind of. So if that sounds like your bag, check out the Kickstarter. Would be awesome to have your support. We've still got some cool rewards. We've got about a little over, we've got about 3 weeks remaining on it right now. So yeah, nice. If you could check it out, if it looks cool, back it. That'd be awesome. I'd appreciate it. If not, I'm not gonna try and sell too hard.
You're not gonna beg.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Any final thoughts on Watchmen or anything you want to let all the people out there know?
Well, I guess on Watchmen, I think one thing I want to say is that, I know we brought up race and briefly talked about it, but I think the important thing to note is that, obviously, there are people who are a lot more qualified to talk about those topics than we are that have said a lot more
absolutely
important, meaningful things about those. So I would go, if that's an aspect of the show that interests you, I would encourage you to go look for other less internet comedian folks to go talk about that, because it is very important. And I'm sure that we didn't do a perfect job of going over it. But
there's a reason I didn't want to spend a lot of time on the topic of race, and that's just I'm far from an expert. I mean, I'm whiter than a blizzard in Wisconsin. What could I really have to say about all that? I am not a historian, so there are definitely a lot of other people out there that are way more qualified.
Right. But it's also, it is an important part of the show, and you certainly don't want to sweep it under the rug, so it's important to mention it. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure we touched on that before we signed off.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining for this wonderful conversation, Gon. Check out Henchman's story over on Kickstarter. For those on YouTube, it'll be in the description. Everybody here live, I linked it in the chat. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. Hope you're all staying happy and healthy out there, and we'll see you guys next time on the Talkcast Podshow.